I got into this, really honing in my watering of my seedlings because my seedlings were out in my living room, basically. And I remember one time my wife came to me and she's like, "You got to do something about these fungus gnats." And I said, "Well,
Yeah.
what am I gonna do?" And so then I was like, "All
Right.
right." So we went through. I did another batch of seeds. I boiled it. Still got fungus gnats, And it's like, what the hell? And it's like it was overwatering, plain and simple. And so now I just kind of got into that habit and I check I mean, my seedlings are right here. And I think the biggest thing is just, it's like a lot of things, just remove the friction from yourself. When you're watering it, like we have to understand if you're going to have a garden and you're going to start your garden from seeds, you need to take the time to take care of them. I mean,
Hmm.
plain and
Hmm.
simple. You don't let your child roll around in a dirty diaper for hours and days. You change the diaper. It's the
Hmm.
same thing. So it's like you water the seeds, take 30 seconds, fill it back up, and leave it there so it's always prepared for you. On the other hand, that can be dangerous because then you always have water at the ready. So you got to be a little
So,
bit careful.
like a cup of water is different than water that has soil in it, depending on what kind of soil mixture you started, right? Like all of that mixes into the feeding on kind of itself.
Yeah.
So the fungus gnats were the worst last year. For the years prior, they weren't that bad. It wasn't more like like if you leave a banana, on the counter, you forget about it, and it's like, oh, I'll have to fight fungus gnats for a couple of weeks. Like that was what the experience had been the prior years.
Right.
Last year, I was ready to go into full hazmat suit.
Yeah.
Like,
That's how it was for me that year. It
um,
was like, I mean,
mhm,
you go in there and you just be like fanning all the time
mhm,
and
mhm.
it just didn't work. And you can help if you've overwatered your plants. You're going there and you're like, oh crap, maybe that's the situation. Like right now, and you've overwatered. There's a couple things you can do. One, putting a fan on your seedlings is really good because it strengthens the stems, prepares them to go outside. So you can set the fan on there and it will help blow the moisture off and it will dry out the surface of the soil, which is where a lot of the roots are. A lot of them are surface roots. And the other
Mm,
thing you can,
yeah.
and first of all, stop watering and you'll be amazed in how long you can go without watering if you've overwatered. And the other
Yeah.
thing is add some bottom heat. That bottom heat will get that out of there and it'll literally turn it into humidity. I mean,
That's a really good idea.
we're talking about the
Mhm,
water cycle here, people.
mhm,
And so
mhm.
you can do that in emergency, you can do that and it will help reverse it. And again, you're going to be surprised, but until you get a lot of roots in your plant, you have to have a lot of roots. But once you start to get roots and a good, healthy root system, then it's going to start using up a lot of water and it's going to be watering it fast to the tune of you're going to have to water right before you harden off outside. You'll probably have to water every other day for a while. And that's something that we need to understand too. And that's actually my trigger for if I've done everything right and my timing is right, once I start to do that and it starts to water constantly, I'm like, man, these things need water. It's like, it's time to get them
Yeah,
outside because quite
yeah.
frankly, I'm tired of watering them. I'm tired of taking care of them. I'm going to move them billy goats outside and just keep watering them outside where it can be messy and then plant them out. So that's kind of how that trigger works for me.
And it almost feels like it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Um, the growth indoors is just going to be different than growth outdoors. I've seen things explode once I got them outside, even in their little seed trays,
Amen.
So you look at it and you say it's in the exact same home that, it was indoors, and you get it outside and it's like in a week. Even when you're hardening it off, you may see growth that you haven't seen in the last 2.5 weeks
Yeah.
while it was indoors. So it's I do hope to be I've been kind of saying it out loud and talking to maybe non-gardening people some because folks are like, oh, is it time? Well, actually it's not that. It's the me, it's almost time, or it's time, or I've started. And they're like, really? And so then I start to walk through some of the things we've talked about more recently, number of weeks. And I'm like really building up to the end of March, really building up to it. I have to do this for myself because I don't like the cold. And there's still going to be many days that are pretty cold. So I have to kind of talk myself into getting out there. But I know all the things that go into this. I know that it will be easier for me to manage things indoors when there's less indoors, right? I know that the plant health will be better once it actually gets outside and into the elements. And that, of course, is assuming I've done all the things that I should have been doing in
Yeah.
the weeks that we're going inside.
Well, I mean, and before we move on to the next one, this what Batavia just said about it, the growth exploding when it goes outside. This comes from the first one we talked about. I mean, and if you got to think about it, if you're running your lights 18 hours, 16 hours a day, whatever, and you move them outside and they're only getting like 6 hours of light, but they're getting much, much, much more powerful light. And that's just supercharge them. I mean, it's almost like giving them a shot of steroids. I mean, it literally will. It amazes me too. Like I'll put them outside and be like, all right, cool. Things get busy, weather gets weird, and I'm like, let me hold off. Let me not plant yet. And then I'm like, holy crap, I've got to plant because now they're getting leggy outside because they've
Yeah.
outgrown the cells and they're starting to shade each other out, And so you get this weird thing that you've got to deal with. So it's all of this is wrapped together. But we'd be remiss if we didn't get into discoloration, and we talked about it originally, and we mentioned in the beginning as well. But overwatering can cause yellow leaves, absolutely.
Hmm.
Now, disclaimer right off the bat: not everything, not all seed starting mixes are created equal. What you use is what you use, and that's for you, and that's good. But typically speaking, a seed starting mix does not have a lot of nutrients in it. So Batavia was smart enough, which by the way, I've never read the bag, said it tells you it has enough food for the first 10 days. And then after that, you need to supplement. So this is where you start to get a lot of discoloration and waters can get very, very murky about what you need to be doing. And you can, if you go fertilizing wrong, you can instantly kill everything.
Yeah.
So we got to be very careful with what we use. And there's multiple ways to do it. And the first thing is if you see yellow coloration and your soil's soggy, stop watering and see if that reverses it at all, if you see more growth.
Hmm.
If you haven't fertilized, and we'll get into fertilization, give it some fertilizer. Now that you know, Batavia, that you only have 10 days from the time that seed comes up, what is your plan? Camera on you.
Yeah. So he knows this is one of those areas that I get sensitive about. So generally speaking,
Leonard,
I'm on
zoom
like,
in.
yeah, right. I'm on like a 2 week schedule when it comes to fertilizing indoors, and it's a diluted fish and seaweed fertilizer, and it's only because it's what I have on hand and what's what I also use outside, right? Yeah, so I'm really about if I generally speaking, my tomato plants and pepper plants can do okay, meaning they don't look like they're experiencing some health woes. Um, my leafy green plants that they show themselves more so as far as needing food, again, higher nitrogen, and that's really what my fertilizer is. So about every 2 weeks. Now, if you think about you're really working with something that's going to be indoors on the low end 4 weeks, and on some of the higher ends, maybe up to 10 or 12 weeks. That lets you know how often you're fertilizing. For a leafy green that may be in my grow area 6 weeks, I'm only fertilizing like twice.
Yeah.
For something like a pepper plant, I'm a little bit more, I probably stretch it a little bit more. Like once I get, 3 weeks in or something, because it may take that long to even before it sets its first true leaves. And so I'm trying to balance, all right, it only has food for 10 days, but I also want to make sure that I'm not over fertilizing, if you will, before these